So yesterday I'm hanging out on Twitter at one point. I don't remember when. And our next guest, Lee Stranahan, writer, filmmaker, tweeted out a tweet. Well, first off, welcome to the program, Lee.
Hey, thanks a lot, Sam. Appreciate it.
Please don't bring anything up about the Red Sox.
I won't. It's rough, man. Very rough.
I don't want to talk about it. I saw that you were trying to go there on your Twitter feed. I don't want to talk about that.
Well, we're both Sox fans, and it's brutal.
It's brutal. It's definitely brutal. All right, with that said, so you tweeted out, I guess, I can't remember what time it was, sometime last night.
Yeah.
Obama's jobs plan is 1, government-funded jobs paid for by 2, tax increases for the rich. That's redistribution of wealth, correct? And I responded, in fact, and obviously this is going to blow your mind, you need not even mention jobs. All taxation redistributes wealth. And then you said, no, not really, not in the sense we're talking about here. This is a jobs proposal that doesn't spur wealth creation. And I'll tell you why I decided, I found your response to be, it sort of blew my mind a little bit because it sort of said to me that you don't, and maybe I'm wrong, and that's why I have you on, but I'm just going to tell you why. Because it sort of said to me that you don't really know what you're talking about. And, I know that on Twitter, and you've done some work for Breitbart, and Breitbart's a guy that, I don't particularly like. I don't particularly like what he does, but I get into it with him on Twitter. And, Breitbart's a guy who knows nothing about policy and sort of admits to that. And his whole thing is he's just, he's part of the sort of the almost like, the talk radio world where you talk smack and try and mock other people and try and gin up stuff. And I'm from that world. And so, which is why I engage with him. And to a certain extent, you're also from that world. You don't necessarily involved in talk radio, but so when you do that stuff on there, all liberals are mad about whatever it is, that's just part of it. But this, when you start getting into policy, I'm fascinated by the idea that people can sort of be that glib and really not know what they're talking about. But with that said, maybe I'm wrong. So explain to me, when you say, and I say, in fact, all taxation redistributes wealth, and you say, no, not really. Let's just break it down. What do you mean by that?
Well, first, am I just dreaming it, or is Rockin' the Casbah playing really loudly in the background?
I didn't hear it, but it's quite possible you
Okay.
did. Now, have we turned it off? Okay.
There we go. Yeah. I mean, it was like Joe Strummer was behind you with a boombox, basically.
Joe Strummer is in spirit behind me with a boombox. I'm sorry. Did you hear what I was saying?
That's right. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I did hear it. Well, look, it's what I said. This is specifically for a jobs bill. Obviously, in the broadest sense of the word redistribute, all taxes are a redistribution of wealth. But that's not the purpose of them. In other words, if I pay my tax money for social safety net or fire protection or police protection, if I pay my taxes and it goes to that, it's really going to protect me from fire, not to provide a fireman a job. That's not the purpose of it. It does provide a fireman a job, but that's not the purpose of it. The purpose of the jobs bill is to spur jobs. So that's what I mean by it's not exactly the same thing.
All right, well, hold on. Let me stop you here. You understand that he released a jobs proposal last week, and this proposal is a proposal to reduce the deficit. It reduces the deficit by $3 trillion. And I don't believe that we should even be talking about deficit reduction, frankly. So it's not a question. I'm certainly I'm not in favor of reducing the thing. I actually think we should be running a bigger deficit. But let's put that aside for the moment. So these things, and yes, he did propose a jobs bill, but let me just ask you this. How much spending is involved in the jobs bill? I mean, if you're making the claim, I'm going to address your notion of taxes aren't to redistribute the wealth; they're simply to pay for services. But we can address that for a second. But how much of the jobs bill is actually spending as opposed to tax expenditures?
In terms of the raw numbers, I have, before I did not prep and look to see what is on the table in terms of the bill.
But I mean,
so
if you are making the claim that Obama is raising taxes on the rich to pay for his jobs bill, but you have no idea what's in the jobs bill. Do you understand that over...
No, I do know what's in the... Here's what I'm saying. The two planks of the jobs bill are, correct me if I'm wrong, he's going to be providing... Again, I don't know the specific number, so I'm not going to pretend I know the number. But what the jobs are, things like teachers, infrastructure, construction, that sort of thing. Correct? That's what it is, and it's going to be funded by. And he said it will be funded by these proposals, including the millionaire tax and these other things.
Okay.
That he's proposing. So without getting into the specific numbers, that's what the planks are.
Over half of his jobs bill that he proposed were tax cuts on payroll taxes. Over half. Over half.
Right.
So the amount of actual spending of infrastructure for teachers, for building roads, all of that is about $200 billion, maybe a little bit less. Okay? A little bit less. So the amount of money that he's talking about raising here in taxes is 3 or 4 times that amount. Just that. I mean, if you want to make that one-to-one correlation, so you don't even know that the jobs bill, that more than half of the jobs bill involves tax cuts.
No, I'm aware I'm fully aware of the payroll tax thing. It's Twitter, so you have 140 characters. It seems to me the two major planks are the jobs, the actual jobs part that's going to be created is the government jobs he talked about. Then, infrastructure and this other spending. It's a continuation of the first infrastructure stimulus bill he did, basically. Yes, there are payroll tax cuts. There are real questions about whether they're going to be effective.
I agree.
But clearly they are part of it. The only point I was making was, and I was literally asking it, is for people on the right, and I'm not on the right. I've done work for Breitbart, but I've written for Huffington Post for
I don't care where
years,
I don't care where you are on the political spectrum. I'm just more interested in the position you're taking. And all right, so let's get to this notion of so now we know. I mean, now we can agree that when we talk about whatever the infrastructure spending is and the jobs that are going to be created, I mean, presumably these need to be paid for, right? I mean, you don't believe that there should be no teachers, for instance, right? You don't believe that there should be no roads, for instance, right?
No, of course not. I mean, that would be Ron Paul. But what I do think is that when you're talking about job creation, and particularly wealth creation, and this is the point, I am very disappointed that I'm not seeing anybody, and this includes the president, but this also includes Congress. This also includes people on the Republican side. I'm not seeing anybody talk about where the strengths in the economy are, which is we now currently live in an information-driven, software-driven economy. The U.S. has massive strengths there. We are a leader in a lot of those areas, and that's where the wealth creation is coming from. I agree that some manufacturing would be nice if it came back, particularly quality manufacturing. However, when I see speeches by all of these politicians, and nobody's talking about entrepreneurship, really, no one's got the president certainly doesn't have a serious proposal for that. Nobody's got a serious proposal for, I'm in favor of teachers.
What does wealth creation mean?
Well, in other words, as opposed to wealth redistribution, wealth creation means literally making money. So, I mean, at a real base level.
What does that mean, making money? You mean like printing money? Like,
no,
for instance,
I mean,
well, when someone has a job, if I'm a teacher, am I not creating wealth when I give my labor for work?
Sort of. It depends. It depends. I don't think the problem with our education system is the number of teachers.
Forget about education system. I mean, let make it if I'm a construction worker, am I not creating wealth by working and getting paid for it?
Again, I would say it depends. It depends what you're doing. So, for instance, if you're a fireman, are you creating wealth? Sure, but once you start feather bedding, once you start adding people for the sake of adding people, then I would argue, in other words, if we just passed a law that said every restaurant needs to hire 5 more people, that would create a whole bunch of jobs, but it wouldn't create any more wealth, because the fact is the restaurant doesn't need, not every restaurant needs 5 more people. So I think this is why I said redistribution as opposed to creation. The things that are actually creating wealth are, you go out and you start up a media company. Sam, you do what you've done. You create something out of nothing, basically. And or you create something from raw materials, and then you make something out of it. You take wood, you make a guitar. That's wealth creation. The wood is worth $100. The guitar sells for $500. You've created $400 in value. And so the thing I worry about is, and again, I see this from everybody, I don't see people talking about the things that are actually going to create
let me ask you a question.
The jobs.
Let me ask you a question. I want to read you a statement. All right, I want to get your response to this, because from what you're saying, I think you would completely disagree with this. Whenever there is any country or uncultivated lands and unemployed poor, it is clear that the laws of property have been so far as extended as to violate natural right. If, for the encouragement of industry, we allow it to be appropriated, this property, we must take care that the employment be furnished to those excluded from the appropriation. In other words, it's a call for redistribution because it would create more industry. That was Thomas Jefferson back in 1785. Now, do you not understand that if you have, aside from the fact that we are, as a country, regardless of what your income is, paying the lowest amount of taxes that we've paid in real terms, in rate terms, and in terms of GDP in 60 or 70 years. Besides that, from the fact, do you not understand the concept that when you give money, essentially, if you want to give it to them through jobs, which I think is probably a better way of doing it, but when you give money to people who are middle class or poor, it has more of a stimulative effect. It creates more wealth than it does if you give it to rich people. Are you aware of that dynamic?
Well, I don't know if I agree, because, for instance, if you're talking about investment money and stuff like that, which the poor certainly aren't in a position to do, and the middle class are less and less of a position to do, I think that investment creates a big spur on the economy as well. So if you're dropping,
which creates more? Which creates more? People going out and buying stuff, or people investing in stocks, let's say?
Well, I would say probably, again, you're talking about a macroeconomic thing where it's a numbers thing. I think people investing in stocks creates a huge amount of stuff, because that's what creates.
Which one creates more wealth?
Consumer spending or investment?
Yeah,
probably investment.
Investment? Well, you're wrong. And let me give you one example.
Well, I mean,
there was a study, and not just the CBO talks about this, but there was a study in 2008 of the stimulus payments that were made. Do you remember those when we all got our checks from George Bush? It's for like $300 per person.
Right.
And a guy named Jonathan Parker did a study on how that money was spent, what people did with it. And it found that the high income group, people who were making over $75,000 a year, as opposed to the below $32,000, high income group increased their total spending by 77% of the value of their stimulus checks. You know what that means? That for every dollar they got, they spent 77 cents, and they saved or invested the other 23 cents. The low income group increased total spending by 128%. That means that not only did they spend every dollar they got, it actually encouraged them to spend stuff that they couldn't afford, or that they had to put on layaway. and it
Okay,
spurred
but do you not
growth.
see that? Do you not see that as a problem? In other words, to me, what you just said explains why the poor people are poor and why the rich people are rich. Because clearly, the smart thing to do, and this, I mean, obviously, the smart thing to do is not to spend it's not to overspend.
I understand, but we're not talking about that now, are we? We're not talking about what people should do personally. We're talking about what will
Well,
create
no,
wealth. You are talking about what will create wealth. This is the
I would
conversation
argue.
we're having. If you want to say that people shouldn't spend more than they have, I agree. But do you know what happens when people save during a recession? The economy spirals down.
Well,
We
no, no.
have deflation.
What you're talking about is creating wealth versus creating debt. And what I'm saying is the people who spent 128 cents out of every 100 cents that they got on probably, by the way, a bunch of crap, because it's I mean, if it's
But
probably
Lee, they're spending that
plastic.
stuff at the place that you're working. They're spending it on my podcast. They're spending it on your guitar that was made. They're spending it on cars. They're spending it on going out to eat. They are creating demand. That is what this economy needs right now. It needs the creation
No,
of
no.
demand. Rich people over a certain amount of money, and certainly over $250,000, the loss of whatever amount of money it is, depending on how much it is, whether it's $6,000 a year in taxes or $50,000 a year in taxes, depending on how wealthy they are, will not affect their spending habits like it will affect people on the other end of and the other end, incidentally, is 80% of the country, will not affect
Look,
their spending habits. And we have a horrible recession right now. And so the idea that income redistribution is not, that taxes should not be there as a way of spurring the economy is fundamentally wrong. There's no basis for that. That's simply a moral judgment that you're making.
No, I'm glad we're having a discussion because I think it's an important one, and the micro level thing that you're talking about relates to the macro thing. I think our economy got into trouble because of people spending 128 cents out of every 100 cents that they had. I think it got into trouble because people got you. And by the way,
we got into trouble because banks spent 33 cents for every penny they had in bets, and it destroyed the financial system.
And the reason the banks were able to do that is because I think that the whole easy credit, the mid 2000s George Bush era, consumerist driven.
I agree.
And I'm with you on. I'm down with all that. What I'm saying is that ease of look. The ease of credit, the over ease of credit, it was so easy to get credit. And by the way, it's not a moral judgment because I did it too. When I was working at NBC, I bought a car that I ended up having $800 a month payments on, which is insanely stupid. But you know what? I had a job. Capital One offered me credit. It was like, hey, let's get a new car, as opposed to going, hey, maybe I should get a slightly used car.
I agree. But that's not the point here. We can't control.
No.
I can't control what you do, Lee. And I'm not talking about going around. This is not the conversation we're happening as to how people should live their lives. We are talking about, in terms of Obama's jobs program, and in terms of taxation, we are talking economic issues. I'm with you. I tell people all the time, I don't have a credit card. I have one. I have a charge card, and that's it.
My debit card.
That's
right.
fine.
Yeah.
But that's not the point here. That's not the point.
Well, no, I think
the point is we need.
I think it is.
But Lee, that's not the point that you're making in your tweet. Has nothing to do with the jobs creation bill. It has nothing to do with tax.
What I'm saying is taking the money from the people who saved it, who saved a portion of their money, and giving it to the people.
They didn't save a portion of their money. They get taxed at a 15% less tax rate than you and I do. Do you understand? Do you know what percentage of the country is subject to capital gains? I mean, in other words, what percentage of the country gets their income through capital gains taxes?
I don't know.
Income that is subject to the capital gains rate of 15%, as opposed to you and I.
I don't know. What percentage?
Take a guess. I'm just curious if you have a sense of this.
No, I really don't. I just don't. I just don't have any sense.
5% of the country accounts for 80% of the income garnered through capital gains. 0.1% controls 40%. Do you understand that you are simply being ripped off? The money that you paid into Social Security went to pay for the tax cuts for those people. Now, that is an argument aside from the fact that the concentration of wealth at the upper end of the spectrum is incredibly unproductive for a society. That money does not flow into the economy. And so we as a society must redistribute it, aside from questions of fairness and whatnot.
Well, no. But this. You're now getting into the crux of the argument, which is what you just said true? And I don't think it is. I don't think it's the case.
Do you have any empirical basis to make that statement?
Sure, because the wealthy people who are, when you say it's not productive for society, you're assuming investment is not productive for society. And you said that already. You said that investment is not and again, it's a clear thing.
I'm not saying investment's not productive for society. I'm saying that spending, creating demand, is more productive for society in dealing with a recession and with dealing with joblessness. Yes. Because no one will invest in a company if there are not people to buy their product. You can build as many guitars as you want out of a piece of wood, but if there are no guitar players out there with money to buy your guitar, it's not going to help. You can have every single person in the world invest, or you can find 10 angel investors who are going to give you $1 million each to make those guitars, but if there's no one to buy them, Lee, it's not going to create a penny.
But what you're talking about is debt-driven consumer spending. And what I'm saying is...
No, I'm not. I'm talking about giving people jobs and putting money in their pocket. I was using that example of how much more poor people and middle-class people spend of money that they get because their needs are not met yet.
But the consumer spending you're talking about, let me make the argument from another standpoint here. That 128 cents of spending, that 28 cents of debt, that went to the very people you're sort of arguing against. That money goes to the credit card companies. That money goes to the 30% interest. That money goes to the payday loan companies.
Lee, you're changing I was using that as an example of how much more stimulative money is in the hands of poor people than rich people. That's the point that I'm making there, not whether or not it's morally right or whether or not people should go into debt. Right. The fact of the matter is, if you give all that money to rich people and they only spend 77 cents of it, we're going to be in a deflationary spiral. And all those people you don't want to get credit will lose their jobs.
No, they won't, because the rich people spending 70% of their money is a tremendous amount more than poor people spending 128% of their money. The rich people spending money, those rich people buy...
Wait a second. Rich people spending 70 cents on a dollar that they have is more stimulative than people spending 128 cents of a dollar they have.
Absolutely, because the 28 cents plus interest that gets spent by the poor person...
Lee, you don't understand what economics are. You don't understand what you're talking about. And it's stunning to me that you can make that statement and be so sure of it, because you clearly have not read anything about what you're talking about. This is all just your gut feeling. And it's offensive to me that you just have this much assuredness when you're telling me that the stimulative effects of people buying, even if they're buying on credit, and I don't agree that they should be buying on credit, but if they just spend $1, which is 25 cents more than the rich people will, doesn't have the same stimulative effects. It's just what you're arguing is that gravity doesn't exist. And you're saying it with the assuredness, and it's so we got. Let's take 3 more minutes of this, because I'm wasting people's time at this point. But go ahead.
Okay. So no, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple math, really. Again, what you're arguing for is debt-driven consumer spending. And
No,
what
I'm
saying
not,
is,
Lee.
a rich,
I'm
a
using
rich
that as an
person,
example of how much more stimulative the redistribution of wealth from the very wealthy to the not wealthy is. That's what I'm arguing. Period. Do you agree with that? No.
no, because because the
All right, Lee, what if I was to
28
tell you,
cents.
all right, what if I was to tell you this, Lee? What if I was to tell you that
Okay.
the people making over $250,000 spend 60 cents, and the people making from the range of 35,000 to 80,000 spend 100 cents?
Yep, it's what I'm saying. It's interesting to me that you don't notice the trend. You don't notice the correlation.
No, Lee,
between
Lee, just answer that question. Just so that we're on the same footing here, because I think you've
Yeah.
been distracted by this notion of people shouldn't go into debt. Fine, I agree with that. If I was to tell you that people who make over $250,000, when they get a dollar from the government, when they get a dollar from anybody, they spend 65 cents of it. And people who make $70,000 a year, $60,000 a year, $50,000 a year, let's say, spend the full dollar. Which is more stimulative?
let me just put this.
Just
another way.
answer
Let
that
me put this
question,
another
Lee,
way.
so that we can see if we're in the same universe.
I think investment is more stimulative. So when people save the money, unless they're putting it under a pillow or burying it in the backyard, if they're putting it back in the bank or they're investing in stocks,
Someone
they're doing
buys a
it.
stock.
But here's the thing.
How does that work? How does that work?
You
When
have-
I invest in Apple, when I buy an Apple stock, how does that stimulate the
Yeah.
economy?
How does what? Wait.
How does that stimulate the
lost you.
economy? I buy
I'll tell you
Apple
how,
stock.
because Apple now has more money, which allows them to do more R&D, which allows them to create more innovative products and get out there in front of it. Which obviously, I mean, if you're saying how do new products and
Apple doesn't have more money. Their market capitalization is higher. Maybe they have the ability to borrow more money. But corporations
right.
right now are sitting on $2 trillion worth of cash. Not line of credit,
Yes, and
cash. Why
yes,
aren't we seeing
and
more
what
job
did it-
creation?
what did it be? Well, that's a whole other topic.
No,
I think
that's
it has to do
exactly
with-
this topic.
Well, no. The answer is partially what Obama said a few months ago, which is technology. He used the example of ATMs. I agree with that completely. We're in the middle of a huge revolution where you can create businesses now without creating as many jobs as you had to create 10 years ago.
If there was a
So that's why I
structural
say-
unemployment issue in the economy, you would see some sectors of employment and wages rising in those sectors, and you don't see it, Lee.
And well, no, I think I would say you do in some.
No, you
but
don't.
I would
There's
say
the
that-
economic data
but-
is that you don't see it.
But the technology
there.
has affected things. The technology has affected things across the board. You're able to set up a podcast radio station.
Oh,
You
Lee.
couldn't have set up a radio
What's the
station
weather
10
outside
years
there?
ago.
What's the weather outside there?
In Dallas, it's hot.
Okay. It's not hot in the rest of the country, Lee. Looking out your window, you cannot tell what the weather is across the country. My podcast is not relevant to the economy.
Wow. It absolutely is, because this technology boom that's allowed you to create the podcast has meant also that if I open up a restaurant, I don't have to hire as many people. I don't have to hire as many people to do graphic design, to design the menu boards, to even work at the restaurant, because technology and automation.
And
has
all
made
this
it
happened
so-
between 2008 in January and
No, absolutely not.
2010.
No.
All right, Lee, look, we're out of time.
It
But
started under Bush. There's no question about it. It started. What it started under any
Lee,
president. It's because of technology.
Lee, there's no empirical data to back up what you're saying. If that was the case, we would see in certain areas, in certain sectors, we would see wages going up because either there was not enough people to fill that job that is now created by the structural changes you're talking about.
You're seeing.
but we're
You're
not.
seeing that
The only
in
thing we're
software.
seeing it.
You're seeing.
Well, no, the only place we're seeing it.
You're
Lee, that's such a
seeing
small
that in software
sector.
development.
No, you're seeing
Okay,
it in
but I mean-
healthcare, basically, and that's it, because people are getting
All
older.
right.
But all right,
Well-
Lee, listen. I think we've satisfied at least the sense that
Your
I think you
curiosity.
don't know what you're talking about, and you think I don't know what I'm talking about.
But I like talking to you, Sam.
I appreciate your coming on and allowing me to
I
vent
appreciate you
here.
having me.
All right, talk to you later.
I know. I think it's a good topic. Take care, Sam.
Okay, bye-bye. I'm sorry, folks. I know there's going to be people on the IM right now who are just absolutely pissed at me. But I'm so just amazed at how people can sort of issue these proclamations. At least if you have an argument with, some of these policy wonks on the right, at least they have developed some type of argument that has certain assumptions that are wrong. But Lee doesn't know what he's talking about on the sort of the most basic aspects. But he's so sure of it. And to me, that's just, I can't get over it. And I know I got to grow up and just deal with that. But I can't get over it. I just don't understand it.